It is being called the world's biggest threat to sea levels before the end of this century. One of the biggest glaciers in Antarctica is melting. It is known as the Thwaites Glacier. And until recently, it was stable. But scientists have discovered a worrying weakness in an ice shelf at the front of the glacier. Basically, the ice shelf holding the glacier back from the sea could shatter like a car's windscreen, is what the scientists have said. But what does that mean for you and me? The collapse of the glacier will have a devastating impact on global sea levels. Let's break it down for you. Thwaites Glacier is massive. It is roughly the size of Great Britain or Florida. And its melting speed has been slowly increasing over the past 30 years. It is currently releasing about 50 billion tons of ice into the ocean each year, and already contributes to around 4% annual global sea level rise. Scientists say that the ice shelf in question is in danger because the warm ocean water is getting under the ice shelf, which is causing it to erode and melt. Scientists say that potentially in the next 5 to 10 years, the eastern ice shelf can break off into hundreds of icebergs. However, the failure of the shelf would not immediately accelerate the global sea level rise, since it already floats on the sea surface, but it will fast forward the splitting of the formerly landlocked glacier into the sea. Let me tell you why this is extremely worrying. The total collapse of the Thwaites Glacier could result in the rise in sea level by several feet, endangering millions of people living in the coastal areas. With us on the broadcast is Professor Angelika Humbert, glaciologist at the Alfred Wegener Institute, Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research in Germany. Thanks very much for being here with us. The ice shelf of one of Antarctica's largest glaciers is nearing collapse. Already, the Thwaites Glacier's melting is responsible for 4% of the global sea level rise. Explain to us the ramifications of this latest development, the latest finding by the scientists.
Yeah, so you need to understand that whenever an ice shelf is breaking off, the ice streams and large glaciers that are lying behind on the grounded part of the ice sheet, they are starting to accelerate because this buttressing force, so this force that is holding back the inland ice that contributes to sea level rise, that can accelerate, and with that more ice is dumped into the sea. In general, you always need to see it that way. Once you are putting more volume into the sea, and with that sea level is rising. But due to the fact that the Earth has a gravitational field around the entire globe, the areas that are affected are not necessarily near the coastline of the location where you lose ice. And that means when Antarctica is losing ice, then the main effect is in the northern hemisphere, and this is due to this effect that's also called self-gravitation. So that's something important to keep in mind. So even if Antarctica is very far away from India or from the coast in northern Europe, it still has a strong effect on our lives.
Right, so that's where things stand as of now. What short-term and long-term steps can then be taken to avert the collapse of the Thwaites ice shelf?
So in general, we know that these processes are triggered by warm water. So as more melting underneath the ice surface you have, as more warm water the ocean is carrying, the higher the melt rates, as thinner the ice, as easier it fractures. In another way, if you have more melt on the surface of glaciers, as more fractures are propagating faster. So in general, it is good to have as low temperatures in the atmosphere as possible, but as well the temperatures in the ocean are also very important. So this plays a major role for saving that amount of ice staying on ground.
It's not just the Antarctic region, but the Arctic also has been reeling under the impact of global warming. Just today, the UN Weather Agency has confirmed that a Siberian city set a heat record by registering a temperature of 38 degrees Celsius in 2020. Why do you think the world is not taking the climate crisis seriously enough?
Yeah, so it's tricky to assess. So we are physicists, we are glaciologists. It's tricky to assess why the people who can act are not acting. What we are observing is indeed that we have extreme melt going on in Greenland and that you have vast amounts of water on the ice sheet surface. And this has secondary effects which are not only affecting sea level rise, but they are also affecting the nature, the wildlife, the habitats in these areas. So it's really a massive warning sign, and it would be wise from us as humanity to react on those warning signs.
Right, just to take a step back and understand what this means, what does a 2-degree global temperature rise mean for the Antarctic ice shelf? Do you think the world can prevent that?
Actually, it's very tricky to estimate how 2 degrees are affecting Antarctica, because with global temperature rise, also the moisture in the atmosphere increases, and with that, the snow deposition on the Antarctic plateau increases as well. You have two scenarios here that are competing against each other. One is that Antarctica may experience more snowfall, but the processes that you are seeing in the Thwaites Glacier area and in the entire Amundsen Sea area, they are more driven by the ocean and rising ocean temperatures, as well as subglacial water that is sitting underneath the glacier. And these two things are kind of competing with each other. And what we see now is that the changes in the Thwaites Glacier over the past decades, they are leading to new fracture patterns as well. And I know it sounds nerdy, but fracture in this material ice, that can be very fast. It is brittle fracture. And then you cannot stop the processes going on.
Professor Angelika Humbert, thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.